Hello, my friends. Welcome to our Dream Big Nation podcast. I'm Lisa Williams, and I am so excited to introduce you to my new friend, Mr. Tony Whatley, who we met on Clubhouse through a mutual amazing man as well, Mr. Daniel Gomez. And Tony is really on a legacy driven mission to help others, which he's doing through building their confidence. And it sounds like you're on a mission to impact a generational legacy, right, Tony?
Yeah, absolutely. If you impact the individual that's catching this message or that's going through the material that I teach, it's going to impact not only them, it's going to impact their children, their friends. Definitely a generational transcendence.
hmm So let's just talk about this a little bit. You were very much like me. You were a corporate executive for many years at, was it Chevron? Were you in the gas industry? Did I remember correctly?
Correct. I spent over 20 years in offshore oil and gas project management. I wasn't an
Right.
executive. I was right there at Chevron, but yeah, I definitely was executive of my own companies for the last few
Right.
years as well.
But you also had this passion that you always followed. You talked about being a car and truck guy, and I think there's so many people that I love what Warren Buffett talks about. Do what you love for, a hobby, but do what there's a need for a business. But you actually managed to do both. And I'm really curious because you talked about going to night school and kind of doing the like the system, what your parents wanted you to do, and yet getting there and not necessarily finding the joy that maybe you were meant to in life. So, share a little bit about that in your journey with our listeners.
It's really unfortunate that so many people out there follow that, what we would call the American dream path. They tell you to get an education, get a job, find a spouse, have two and a half kids, build a white picket fence. And they think that, hey, if you could do that, you've lived the American dream. So, I mean, that sounds great. I guess if you're homeless or in your poverty, like that's an awesome dream. But what it really did for me was it really set my goals too low. And I didn't realize that. I mean, I grew up lower middle class, two working class parents. My mom was a cafeteria worker in the public schools, and my dad got out of the Vietnam War and he went to work in the chemical refineries here in Houston. And so I got to see two really hardworking parents that struggled with money. And we lived in this fixer upper houses. Like every house I grew up in was basically a flip house that we would live in while we, the family, would restore it and make it nice. And we would upgrade every few years. And that's just what we did. And I just thought that was normal. Right. And so when we were young, we always tell like, hey, if you can make a six figure, that's like the dream. So they always tell you, hey, if you go be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer, you got good odds, right? I was very average in math, but I decided to go get an engineering degree. And it's because for my love of cars that you had mentioned. I said, well, if there's something in engineering maybe that does with cars, I can get that degree and it'll be something that'll motivate me. And I didn't understand. I was the first one in my family to go to college on both sides of my family. So I didn't realize that even though a mechanical engineering degree sounds the same on paper, it also depends on where you go to school. They teach you different versions of the same degree. And I didn't realize that. So here in Houston, the school I went to, University of Houston, was really focused on refinery and petrochem. So a lot of the school, the knowledge that we have, the exercise is all done in chemistry based, plant based things about doing chemical plants, oil and gas. And had I gone to school somewhere else up north, maybe in Detroit area, it would have been more automotive themed. And if you would go to Virginia or things like that, it'd be more mining themed. So it's always like they try to educate people based on where they're at. So that's one key thing about students. Like if you're out there and you got your parents and you got kids that are approaching college, they want a certain degree. Maybe they're talking about wanting to go out of state to go to school and things like that. Actually understand what the curriculum is based on, and then that aligns with their actual career. Because I wanted to do automotive industry, and that's why I got that degree. But I was already 2 3 years into the schooling before I realized like this is all oil and gas. But that didn't keep me from getting interviewed because I had a lot of passion for cars, and I got interviewed for some of the big three and suppliers up in Detroit. And what I also didn't realize was the variation in pay, right? So I'm talking to these people. It sounds really interesting. I'm nodding my head over the phone because that's what we did. We didn't have Zoom back then. They couldn't afford to fly me up for interviews. I was a low level peon engineer, right? So it's they get to the money part, and I was like, listening to the salary, I was like, man, that's just not much. I'm kind of making that as a manager of a restaurant already, right?
Right.
And I'm thinking like, okay, okay, cool, sounds great. Let me get back to you. And then I said, well, I'm here in Houston. It's the oil capital of the world. Let me start to see what's going around this area. And it was literally double the salary. I mean,
Hmm.
it was double the salary. And I was like, well, I can stay in my home city and make double the salary and actually be able to afford the cars that I would have to go work on if I was living in Detroit. And plus, Detroit compared to Houston, no contest. I'll stay in Houston all the time.
Right.
So it was an easy decision, and I actually went and bought myself a brand new Trans Am when I graduated because I got my first big boy job with an actual salary, and so I got to enjoy the
Big boy
cars.
job. I
You
love it.
know, it's funny. It is so funny that big boy thing because I remember the arrogance of some of the salaried workers that you would meet when you're young and you're still working hourly type jobs. And they
Yeah.
would feel so important and so prestiged about themselves because they had a salary. And I
Hmm.
thought, wow, man, someday I'm going to have a salary too. Like, see how small I was thinking back then.
Yeah.
And when you start to get into the management ranks at your corporate job, you have this realization at some point. You realize that your salary is still based on an hourly rate. Like literally, if you go into the HR software or you're doing payroll software, you're typing in an hourly rate for salary, and
Right.
you're like, this is hourly too, but I'm actually making less per hour because they're making me work more hours.
Right.
So,
Have you ever asked those salaried people to
yeah.
break down their hourly rate
Ah,
when they right? You were probably making more than them
I
in the
guarantee
restaurant
it.
business, you know?
Guarantee it. Especially as a bartender or a waiter, I was guaranteed
Right.
making more per hour than some of my engineering roles.
You said to me, so when we first met, you shared with me that you had an accident, you had wealth from a monetary standpoint in your life, and you didn't want to die as a rich, I don't know if you said asshole or like just some rich guy. And so you started to think about what's next, and you looked at bullying, and you looked at just how you can help. I think you talked about that, but you landed on confidence. And I think it's such a timely conversation right now, Tony, because so many children and so many adults, we are raising a, a generation of unconfident people because of our own unconfidence. And so talk to us about that.
Yeah, going back to the accident, it wasn't rich asshole body, which is rich guy, because I've always been nice. I've always been a
I
nice person,
added
right?
that. I don't know why I added that. I actually am like, there
It's a
must be something
stigma. It's a
after.
stigma. I
Like,
get it.
right?
I get it. You people see my fancy cars and you think I've got a small dick. I get it. So it's it's the stigma. It's just the stereotype we live with, right?
Right.
Oh, he's definitely compensating for something, like I tell you. No, but no, that was a good moment that I had to go through to really understand time. Okay, because yeah, I had built companies and sold those for millions, and I enjoyed life, and I did it all in the background because I had my own insecurities. I didn't like being on camera. I didn't like public speaking. I had stage fright. I had bullies as a junior high and grade school kid. I have a skin condition called vitiligo. If you're not familiar with that, it's where you have these white spots that just are all over your skin. And when I was young, they were all over my legs and my arms, and now they've gotten onto my face and things like that. And when you're young, people will look at you and go, "What's wrong with you?"
Yeah.
You know,
You just want
and
to fit in.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, they would call you things like cheetah boy and stuff like that just because you have spots, or spotty Whatley and these weird kid type names that you come up with. And although I was always socially fine, I had pretty girlfriends. I played sports. I did all these things, and I had straight A's. I did everything well. It was always the thing that I was more critical about myself than other people were. You know,
Hmm.
I mean, I remember being in high school and I got tired of people asking me about my legs. And anytime I wore shorts, sometimes I would just put touch up makeup on some of the bigger spots just so they wouldn't be as, prevalent. And wouldn't be asked about them because I just got really uncomfortable being asked all the time, what's
Yeah.
that? What's wrong with you? Right. And so, you carry that into adulthood, and we all have our own version of that. Everybody has their own version of that. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And so I just got really comfortable being a high performer without being on center stage in the spotlight, right? I knew I could do it, but I was never would, right?
Mhm.
We always like think about when you're a kid or even a young adult and or even adult now and you go to a concert for example and you see the lead singer up there in the spotlight and they're just rocking it out or the lead guitarist the spotlight comes on like everybody gets their turn in the spotlight and you start to get the chills you're like man that's so amazing it's got to be amazing to do that and if you don't admire that that's fine that's because that's not in you but if you do admire that realize that every characteristic or trait that you see in other people you contain within you because you wouldn't be locked in and admiring that ability unless you had it within you. Now, you may
Mhm.
not have the skills or the courage to be able to do that right now, but it is within you. It's contained within you. It's deep down in there. You're going to have to figure out how to get some lessons and unlock that and showcase that. But for me, I always admired the performers, even though I knew I just couldn't do that. I was too it's too scary. I don't want to put myself out there. It's very vulnerable. But that accident changed all that, right?
Mhm.
Because yeah, I hit a concrete wall at 130 miles per hour. And as I was approaching that wall, you think you would have that screaming face like you see in the movies. Like, I really thought I was going to die because, I mean, you're in a two-door sports car about to hit a concrete wall on the side that I'm on at that speed. I was like, I got bad odds. And I remember even looking at that wall and just thinking to myself, well, here I go. I said that to myself. I said, well, here I go. And the weirdest overwhelming fear thing that it just kind of dissipated. I had fear moments before that when I thought I could save the accident, but when I was steering straight and the car was going hard left, I had no control over that. And I said, well, here I go. And I felt an overwhelming sense of peacefulness in that moment.
Mm.
It was really
Mhm.
peaceful. I felt warm. I felt not scared, just really facing what I thought was certain death. And I felt peacefulness. And that's
Mhm.
not what you would expect to feel in that kind of a situation with all the things that were going on. And yeah, impact hits and I hear glass breaking and things coming to pieces and lights are flashing on and off. The airbags deployed. The cabin's filled with white powdery smoke and the car's just making a bunch of racket. And there's literally wheels being ripped off the car and cars just spinning. And I just remember like surviving the impact. I shut my eyes right before I hit the wall and I just kept my eyes closed and I'm just kind of peeking around and see what was going on and the car sliding. And I just remember focusing on staying awake because most people do not die from the impact, they die from a fire because when
Yeah.
your brake fluid and your oil and your gasoline, all that spills out and there's all it takes is one spark and it's like poof, it's a big flame ball. So I realized like, hey, I got my flame gear on, but I got to get out of the car. Like otherwise you're dead. So I just remember the car sliding and just thinking, get out of the car. You got to stay awake, stay awake, stay awake. I don't know if I'm injured or not. Just thinking I'm conscious, like stay awake. And I get out of the car and I had to pry that door open because it caved in on that side. And I get out and I'm standing there. It's on the dark end of the track and it's a quarter-mile drag strip. And I could hear the paramedic, the ambulance, and I could hear my friends sprinting up the track. I could hear four-wheelers approaching me and people yelling. And I'm just there by myself. I had the helmet off and I'm just looking at the wreckage. There's literally two of the wheels are gone. And I was really calm. And the paramedic, she put me in the back of the ambulance and she's feeling around on me, asking if certain things hurt or not, and asking me questions to see if I had a concussion, but I'm answering really clearly. And at the end of that, she goes, can I tell you something that's unusual? And I was thinking, great, here's the bomb. Like she's gonna tell me about an injury or just something. And so I was expecting the worst, and she just said, "You're in a major accident, but you're remarkably calm." She goes,
Mhm.
"People crash out here every night, and you usually get the adrenaline shakes, and your voice is all fluttering, and your heart rate's elevated, like all the fear symptoms. Like I was really calm, and I just remember being really calm. I'm sitting there in the back of the ambulance looking at the wreckage still, and what was going through my mind at that time was I could have died,
Mhm.
and why am I still here? And that leads to, well, how would I have been remembered had I died?
Mm.
And that one you sit with for a while because you're sitting there thinking, well, how would I have been remembered if I would have just died right there? I mean, what would my son think? What would my wife think? What would my friends, my parents think? What are the people that knew me think? How are they going to remember? What would I be remembered? And you start to go back and just roll back into the time and some of the people that had passed away recently, and you start to ask yourself, well, how were they remembered? That person was someone like me. They had the same hobbies. They had the same friend circles. How did we say? What did we say about that person, right? And it was always like, so and so gone too soon. Nice guy, had cool cars. Like it was always somewhat superficial, right? It
Right.
was always like just nice, gone too soon. Those kind of cliches, you hear them all, right? Hope he's racing upstairs with the big man. I mean, you hear these things and it sounds great, but when it's you, you realize like that's it. Like that's it. That's it. Like being nice guy with cool cars and successful. Like that's it.
Yeah.
And I've always been a high performer. I don't believe in I've ever had an underdog story, even though that definitely was definitely a lot of people that doubt you as you're doing things. Everybody goes through that. I've never felt like I was the underdog. I never felt like I was given the negative hand. And so I was always trying to push myself to do more. And when I started to really think about how I was going to be remembered, it was a like a glowing neon sign that said like you didn't do enough yet. You haven't done enough yet. And so that's when I decided it's like I'm just going to leave my career and I'm going to figure out what that even means. And I'm fortunate enough to have been in a financial situation to do that for the next 2 years. I left my job and I just basically I left a job that's paying $240,000 a year. It wasn't an easy decision,
Yeah.
you know. And a lot of people in that industry thought like I was crazy. Like, man, you're at the top of the food chain. You work so hard. You're so good at this. Like, you just walk away from that. And I got my mom asking me like, "Are you gonna get a job? And are you gonna waste your
Does she
degree?" And
does
like,
she still ask you that, Tony? Your mom?
still asks me that. My Japanese mom.
Has
I
she
feel
been
bad.
to has she been to one of your events?
No, no, she hasn't. But we're trying to get her to go one of those.
You're
But
gonna get her to
the
go.
whole personal development thing and the entrepreneurship thing, just it's confusing to her. So
It's so confusing.
I get it.
Well, it's like, I mean, my one of my dear friends is Filipino, and she's always told me like, Lisa, I mean, a B is like an Asian F. Like
Totally.
it's like this is ingrained in our brain, like
Yes.
from a very early age. And you're right. If you're not an engineer or like first it's a doctor, then it's an engineer. I think accountant is in there too
Something.
somewhere, right?
It's gotta be a six
Something in
figure career.
finance or right.
I mean, I get it. The cultural thing, I get it because yeah, I was born in Japan and we moved here when I was 2. So
Hmm.
I yeah, to give you an example of that, I never missed a single day of school
Hmm.
from
Right.
kindergarten through graduation in high school. I never missed a single
Wow.
day, not one. Even when I was sick, like your ass is getting on the bus.
Right.
Unless you're dead, you're getting on the bus.
Yeah.
And I remember getting my very first C, and that was in college. And I thought like this is almost like suicide worthy. There's a lot of
Yeah.
pressure on kids with Asian parents.
Oh, it
You
is.
know,
Okay, so let's go there because you're how old is your son?
he's 21.
Okay, so is mine. And you just have the one?
Hmm.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So my children think I'm crazy right now. Because they grew up with the mom, the corporate executive mom that was like, I just had a lovely guest on my show that shared with me something that just made me laugh. He's like, I just woke up and I decided I'm going to have a no asshole rule anymore. And I didn't have a no asshole rule. I worked for a lot of them. And yet I was bringing this home to my kids and basically they were hearing what I was talking about and it became, I mean, so now I'm on this mission, as you said, of self-development and meeting so many amazing people like you, and they think I'm crazy.
Yeah.
So I mean, what would you say about this journey that has done for you and your son? And maybe you were already far along in that, but how would you counsel someone like me that is, trying to get their kids to know the new mama, you know what I mean? Or the new daddy, right?
Well, when I started this, my son was around 18. So I left corporate in 2015, but I didn't start doing what I'm doing until a couple of years in, like I said. So at age 18, yeah, he had some friends and stuff. So I remember the moment that it was kind of a funny moment, right? Because I was hanging out with his friends. It was one of his birthday parties. We were at Top Golf, and his friends like, His name's Philip. He's like, Philip, your dad has more Instagram followers than all of us to combined, and they just thought that was cool, but it's kind of like,
And that's like a badge of honor in their world, like for
I know,
sure, right?
yeah, but it's kind of weird at the same time. I was like, I guess
Yeah.
I do. That's kind of
The
cool. Hey,
embarrassing dad with
yeah,
Instagram, right?
yeah, yeah. Like the TikTok moms nowadays, like doing all this crazy dances and stuff, embarrassing their teenage daughters.
Right.
But he knows that I've always been the same person, but he knew that I also needed to change and go do things that made me uncomfortable. And for me, that was getting over the fear of public speaking. And I joined Toastmasters, and I showed up every day, and I raised my hand and volunteered to make myself really uncomfortable. And I did social media videos every single day for over a year. And that's kind of where that 365 driven comes from. Is like, I just did it. And I honestly, I sucked at it at the beginning, but that was the best I can do. I knew that, hey, and this goes for not just videos, it goes for everything. If I know that I'm going to go do something new, I don't ever feel entitled to believe that I'm going to be good at it initially, or that I deserve to be good at it initially, because some people do things now and they look like they're really good at it, and you think like, oh, they must be a natural, or they're so talented. And we all know that every successful person knows that that's BS. It's repetitions, it's dedication, it's studying the craft or that skill and just applying it and getting the results, which gives you more confidence. So you do a little bit better and you just keep pushing yourself. And eventually you get to the point where you're really good at it, you're really proficient at it. And I just knew that if I'm going to go do videos or social media content, which I knew was very important for what I do to be a coach, an executive coach, I had to get my message out there. I had to write a book, and I had to become the right person to carry that book message out there in the public as well, because I just wanted to avoid that whole thing for a while. And it kept punching me in the face. Like a perfect example of this is that me writing the book was a, I hate to say it now, but I remember thinking this back in 2017 when I was writing it. It launched in early 2018, but I remember writing the book Side Hustle Millionaire and thinking like, wow, this is going to be a good way for getting the knowledge in my head out to the public, but I don't have to speak, and I don't have to be on camera, and I could just, so it's kind of cowardly, right? It's kind of cowardly. Like I can get it out there and nobody knows how, I can still be in the shadows, and it might
Right.
do good, it might not, but hey, at least I tried. I'm already talking myself out of the success that it had. And sold over 1,000 copies the first week. It became a number one bestseller on the business category on Amazon. And yeah, it definitely changed the entire trajectory of my career. But the thing is while I was writing this book, my editor was getting a chapter at a time, and he's looking at it. He's like, dude, this book's going to be good, man. I can tell already. And I was like, hey, thanks, man. I'm really putting a lot of thought into this. I appreciate that. And probably by chapter 4, he started to shift his message where it was like, man, I think people are going to want to interview you. I bet you end up on TV or on stages. And I was like, oh crap. Like the thing I was avoiding by writing a book is coming back to confront me again. So that's when I started to join the Toastmasters and hired a speaking coach and started doing videos. And I had to become the right person to carry the book and the message. And that's when my son started to notice things about it. Like, wow, he's really doing something different. He's going for it. And he's proud of me because he saw that I was, pursuing a dream. Because that's one of the biggest things about parenting is that how are we supposed to convince our kids to chase their dreams and pursue their dreams? Because we say that their whole lives, even when they're little, like you could be a spaceman when you grow up, like whatever. Like you're always encouraging your kids to chase their dreams, but kids don't learn from listening, they learn from watching. And if they
Yeah.
don't see mom or dad chasing their own dreams, what makes you think that they're going to believe you telling them that they can go chase their dreams? If you
Hmm.
come home every day and you're yelling about your job and how your life sucks and you have no money, and like your kids are probably looking at you going, wow, you're a big hypocrite.
Hmm.
They might not even know what that word means yet, but they're like, you're a big hypocrite. You've been
They're
telling me to
thinking it.
chase my dreams. Here you are, like settling for that jackass boss telling you what to do, and like you're putting up with this nonsense. And you're not. I know you like to dance, mom, but I don't see you do any dancing lessons.
Right.
Like you know what I mean. So you have to demonstrate to your kids, and I've always really demonstrated to my son that I'm chasing my dreams.
Hmm.
But now it was like on the amplifier. Like post accident, it was like time is more valuable. I thought I was going to have plenty of time to do this stuff, and now I realize it could have been all gone in that moment. So it's amplified now. I just put in more effort and I do more with my time now.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's a deeper issue going on in our world, because not only are we kind of trained from little to be part of this system that's supposed to bring us happiness, but 90% of those people don't even make over 100K.
No.
And in California, that's like
Oh
poverty
yeah.
level,
You got four
right?
roommates.
Right. 4 roommates, and you have, I mean, a big passion for me, Tony. You and I haven't even talked about this, but let's just talk about the debt crisis in our country that our kids are graduating
Ah,
with this mountain of debt that they'll never be able to repay, that then just gets compounded because of interest, and now it's been on forbearance and all these things. I mean, I just imagine if they, like, let me ask you. So, since you've been in this entrepreneurial space, if you got to pick a course curriculum that they would start to infuse into our schools around your favorite books, what would that look like? Aside from your own, because I love your book. Yeah.
no, to me, that is actually one of my biggest long-term legacies that I would like to see is either building a public school curriculum or public schools, or if not even a private school that really teaches entrepreneurship and leadership as
Yes.
an option. They need to be an
Mm-hmm.
option. They don't teach you that these things, and even in college, a lot of people are like, young people, especially my son's age, like, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. I was like, oh, cool. Well, let's go start a business. Well, I'm going to go to school first and get a degree in business administration first. I'm like, that's not going to help you be an entrepreneur. It's going to help you
Mm-mm.
be a manager. Do you want to be a
Yeah.
manager or an owner? Well, what do you mean? It's like college, it's university. Like they teach you, like, and then you get people that even in the master's programs getting their MBA thinking that they're going to be a good entrepreneur because they got an MBA. It's like, no, like that doesn't help you at all. That helps you to be executive at a company, but not always going to be an entrepreneur. Like you're not taking the risks that as an employee, right? So I think that there's really too many degrees out there now that should be hobbies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When you and I were young, information was not readily available. We definitely didn't carry it in our pocket. I remember information was either you go to the library or you had a cell of Encyclopedia Britannicas. That's the only information that you had available, or reading
Right.
newspapers, right? But it was always at the library, and like internet was just kind of a new thing in late '90s. And so if you needed a degree, if you needed a specialized set of skills or knowledge, you had to go to school, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's where information was. Now we're the opposite of that nowadays. Now we have too much information. Literally, you could learn anything you want to learn on YouTube and reading books and buying courses and hiring a coach. Like you can learn every single thing. Information is in abundance.
And it's almost making us dumber.
Yes. Yeah. Because you can Google everything. You don't have to remember anything.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just the information is there. But so now we've solved the information problem that you and I, had as a youth. But people are still wanting to go spend $100,000 to buy something that's in their pocket. It's just like it's right there. Like, why do outside of being in medical professions or things that require a specific license or a
Yeah.
specific degree, everything else can be learned on your own for free almost. So
Right.
why do we still
Well,
do
and
that?
I mean, imagine if my oldest son is your as Philip's age, and then my middle son just graduated high school, and he's in a band, and he's been drumming since he was 7, and he is good, and he loves it. And he was all ready to go to school, Cal State Fullerton. He was ready to go, and we went for coffee a couple weeks ago, and he's like, Mama, I just can't picture myself doing this. And 3 years ago, Tony, I would have been freaking out, right? Because that
I'm such
that
a
that was,
failure. I'm
wait,
such a
what did I
failure.
do? Wait, I've
My
been saving
kid.
your whole life. Like, what do you
Oh
mean
my
you're not,
gosh.
And I am just like so thrilled for him that he's, I'm offering, well, what should we do instead? Can I get you a retreat with Tony? Like, what do you want to do? Because, like,
Yeah.
seriously, I think that is just, man, I just am so excited for him. And imagine if we could shift the paradigm with so many of us are parents that are in this same situation, where our kids are going off to school. They have no freaking clue what they want to do. And yet we're going to go into debt and help them go into debt to basically have a piece of paper that what tells them they completed something.
It's a it's a dual kiss of death
It is.
because you mentioned it. There's too many of us parents. This is especially for you parents listening. There's too many of us that define our own self worth based on the university that our child attends.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's a historical thing that your family, your grandfather did it, so you got to do it. Like it's an ego thing, or maybe you couldn't afford the nice university. You went to a local community college, but you did really well for yourself, and you saved up enough money, and you go, little Betsy wants to go to Ivy League, like I'm going to give it to her, and you're probably wanting it more than she is. Let's be real, because I've seen this too many times. Like in corporate, I've worked with executives and I worked with people that were making multiple six figures, and they're taking the little trips going to different states and showing their kids the campus. But I would know these kids, and the kids really weren't that excited about doing that. They were just kind of like going, but the parents were like, "Oh yeah, we're going to Yale this weekend, and then we're going to go to MIT," and like they're all like gung ho about these college campus trip vacation weekends. And I'm thinking to myself, like, you're doing this for yourself. This isn't for your kid. Like, did you even ask your kid where they really wanted to go? They probably didn't want to go any of those. But
Right, right.
just because you can afford it, and just because next time you're at the putting green with your boys, and you're doing your putt, and you're like, my son's going to MIT, or my son's
Mm-hmm.
going to Harvard, or it's like it's all like humble bragging parents that ruin their kids and saddle them with a lot of debt.
You know what's funny? I was at my book club, and I love my girls. Um, but I'm curious. I have a question after you about this. But what made me think of it is it was literally like it was like we were sitting around the dinner table, and it was like they were all like saying that, and I said something, and it basically was I am so excited because Connor is gonna pursue his dream, and he's not going to school. And I'm so excited about it. And it was like silence. There
What are
was
you,
literally
crazy?
like, what do you mean? I mean, there was silence, and then there was like, oh, I hope you're okay. It was like they were concerned about me. What
Yeah.
is up with that?
Yeah. I mean, it's people want you to do what they think is the right path. Otherwise, they're not going to understand that. I mean, even example of like on social media, let's say that if somebody goes on there and Facebook, for example, and says, "Hey, I got a new job," and everybody's like, "Yeah, go kill it! Like, congrats!" And they get 150 people like congratulating them and saying like, "Awesome!" And then the same person could have gone on there and said, "Hey, I started a new company," and like five people would be like, "Congrats."
That is, I've seen that so many times, and especially in the network marketing space. That is an under misunderstood industry, in my opinion. Sorry, guys, there's a fire here in California, so we're getting a
It's
little
hot. We are
background
hot.
noise here.
Hot
This
America.
conversation is hot. That's what it is. Let's fire America up, shall we, Tony?
So,
Okay, so I have, oh my gosh, I feel like I could talk to you forever, but I have a question for you.
mhm.
So I'm writing, I'm writing a book right now with my best friend who passed away last year. Her name's Elizabeth. She was the most amazing woman of faith. She had so much. She was that person that didn't, have a tomorrow, right? And
Mhm.
we're writing a book together because she always wanted to write something, and it's called Conversation with an Angel. So if you had an opportunity, and you might need to get back to me on this because it's kind of a deep one,
Okay.
but if you had the opportunity to ask someone a question in heaven or the afterlife or whatever you believe, if you I hope you believe there is something greater than
Absolutely.
us. Um, what would you ask?
I guess it requires a context. Is it about me, or is it about
It could be
life,
about
or
you, it could be
you
about
know?
life.
I'm always curious about I'm always curious about stories about myself when I was younger, right?
Hmm.
because looking back at a lot of the things I did, I knew that I was a little bit different looking back. But I'm wondering if adults in my life, whether that was my grandparents or teachers or other people that had seen me, even young, like 5 years old and older, right? I wonder if they saw things in me that were unique, and what was that? Because when you start to leave a legacy of success, you start to wonder, like, were there signs? Like, is there something that I could teach or raise awareness of other
Mm,
people, even as a child? Like, maybe if you're a parent, you're looking at your kids and like, yeah, oh, they're doing that. Like, you should encourage them to do this. Like, it's like those are the kind of clues. Like, I like to hear stories about my youth, and like one of the good stories, a friend of mine, like from kindergarten, actually shared me a story, and he shared it with me about 3 years ago, so a long time ago, right?
mm-hmm.
And he said, I was talking to him about our kindergarten teacher. She didn't like that I was social. She didn't like that I was talking to other kids all the time. And she
Yeah.
even like my mom, like she even called my mom and like had two parent teacher conferences. Like, Tony's too social. We can't get him to like, like pay attention. She's like, well, where's his grades bad? Like, no, he's got the best grades in the class. Like, and so you're just saying that he talks too much. Like, so what's the real problem here? And I remember that I was thinking like, whatever, teacher, like she's a dream killer, right? Here I am,
Right.
here I'm getting paid a lot of money nowadays to talk, right? So the joke's on her. But one of the
You
friends
need
that,
to reach out to her and tell her,
yeah,
hey, have you
one of
noticed?
here's a character story with that though, because we were sharing that in a reunion group on Facebook, and a guy Adam, he typed in, he goes, hey, I remember that class, and he goes, here's one thing that always fascinated me about you. He goes, that teacher didn't like you. First of all, I don't know, maybe she was racist because I was half Japanese and I grew up in an era where all the authority people were World War II people that didn't like Japan. So I didn't know, I wasn't aware of that kind of stuff, but maybe that's what it was. But he goes, she just didn't like you, and he goes, I remember her trying to embarrass you in front of the class by moving your desk by the trash can and making you sit by the trash can. And I said, well, what did I do? And he goes, you just smiled and you just did it. Like it didn't bother you at all. And I think that irritated her worse. And so I've always been a positive type personality. And like, if you're going to try to do that to me, I'm just going to rock on and be like, show you like, let's go.
Right.
I'm good, and it was funny that he told me that. And I remembered when he said that, it's like, I remember the trash can thing, but I
Right.
completely had forgotten about it. And another example was high school football. My dad didn't really support it. He was busy. He hated his job. He was just always busy about doing things, and he never went to the games. And he was hoping I would quit because it was kind of a pain in the ass because you had to go to practice two times a day in the summertime, or 2 days, and we lived about 6 miles from the school. And my dad's like, well, if you want to play, don't expect your mom to drop you off at practice. Like, you're gonna have to ride your bike or your skateboard every day. I'm like, okay, and I didn't complain about it. That's what I wanted to do. And so I'd put on my pads and I would get on my bicycle and I would ride my bike to practice twice a day. Like, I'd go in the morning really early and I'd come home for lunch and I'd ride back again and I'd ride back after practice. It's like 8 p.m. And I remember my friends in that same group were like, dude, we used to pass by you and see you. You're like the only kid riding your bike. Like, all of our moms are dropping us off, giving us Gatorades. It was a kind of a nice school. We just lived in a bad area of it, and they just always saw me ride my bike, and they just thought, one of my better friends that I'd come out with, he's like, dude, that always impressed me because like nobody else did that. Nobody was willing to
Right.
do that, but you never complained about it. And I never complained about it. I was like, okay, that's what I need to do. I'll go do that.
Mm-hmm.
And here's where it got like really emotional because I was telling my mom about this story about 3 months ago. We're at her house and we're eating dinner, and it was just her and I just sitting there, and I was telling her about that, like that recollection, and she started crying. She started crying, and she was like, your dad made me do that to you. She goes, I never wanted it. I had the time. I could have taken you to practice because she wasn't
Mm,
working she's, I could have done it. I wanted to, but your dad made me like not take you because he thought you would quit.
mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I never quit. And I only had to do that for 2 years, and I got my license and I could drive. But she was crying. Like, she felt like a failure to the other moms because all the other moms saw her son riding her bike to school. So
And
there's
and
so
how
many weird
crazy
things.
and how crazy is that? Like, for example, do you think you would have had, which sounds like a very meaningful conversation with your mom, had you not gone on this self-development journey of your own?
No, I would have
Probably,
never had
probably
that.
never, probably wouldn't have ever maybe remembered it or brought it up. Certainly not brought it up.
And it's just that level of awareness, like those moments. It's when you realize like you had a version of the history, but you
Mm,
realize that other people had a different perspective of the same memory, and
yeah.
you were just not even aware that it existed. Like I just figured that's just what I had to do, and I didn't complain about it. That's my character.
Hmm.
I've always been willing to do what it takes to get what I want, and I didn't realize that that would upset my mother back then. Like it wasn't like I was doing it intentionally, but she felt like a failure because she's being judged by the other mothers. And like that's a whole different dynamic you don't even think about. Like you're like what? Yeah, and she was bawling. She's like, I knew I could do it, and your dad wouldn't let me. And he's like, he'll quit. Watch it, he'll just quit. And
Yeah.
she was proud of me that I never did.
You said something that struck me, and I know we're running out of time. This we're actually going way over because I feel like I can talk to you forever. But so you said that your dad hated his job,
Yeah,
and I resonate with that because my father hated his job. And when I I decided to stop working for assholes. I remember I was going home to Alaska to visit my mother who was dying. And my mother and father had a love affair that was amazing, you know? And sorry,
that's right.
um, like how many people are like just living their life and hating it right now, you know? And I mean, what would you say to those people?
It's your choice. I'd be tough love Tony right here. I was like that. It's your choice.
Yeah.
It really is your choice. You feel helpless. You want to take the victim role. Maybe you want to blame your spouse or your boss or situation or where you live, but everything's changeable. It's not easy, never easy. The hardest things are always worth fighting for, but they're never easy. Nothing of value comes easy.
Yeah.
The hardest decision I ever had to make was leaving my son's mother before my son was even 1 year old. It was the hardest decision I ever had to make. And the only reason I stayed in the relationship that long is because I was so worried about what kind of dirt bag she would hook up with that was going to abuse or raise my son the wrong way.
Hmm.
You know, we were never married. It was an unplanned pregnancy. It was someone I was seeing, and circumstances created that. But I wanted to be a dad, and we tried to make things right, but we were just never meant to be together. I mean, we were just a toxic relationship. And I grew up in a very respectful, disciplined household. She was very much a alcoholic and verbally abusive, like, definitely the unhappy drunk,
Right.
and not even remember what she would say the next day. So I lived with that for almost a year, like most of the pregnancy. And then after he was born, I was just trying to make it work, and I was stressed out and I was depressed. I felt like my life was out of control because I was with somebody I didn't even love.
Hmm.
And I stayed in it to do the right things, or we were worrying about what other people think.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Didn't want to be a deadbeat dad and all these social characterizations that are created. And then I realized like I can still be a dad. I could still choose to be a part of his life and be the weekend dad. I could be the best weekend dad ever. And that's what I decided because even the businesses I was building back then, she would make fun of those. And she'd say that that's a waste of time. That's stupid. I can't believe like guys talking about cars on the internet. Like that's stupid. That's dumb business. That stupid business made millions of dollars.
Right. Right.
And it would have never happened had I been with her because my life had already been out of control, and I was wanting to take the victim role, but I knew that it was always because of the situations that I created. That everything that is happening in my life was based on decisions I had made. So if you're out there and things aren't going well, it's your choice. I hate to tell you that, but it's your choice. And the life that you're living now, whether that's good or bad, is based on decisions you made years ago. Years
Hmm.
ago. Whether that's your health, your finances, your relationships, everything's based on your own decisions that you made years ago. outside of
Hmm.
acts of God, you know? But here's the beauty in knowing that once you can learn to take full accountability and accept that, you start to get excited because you realize you can control your future.
Yeah.
You know that the past has created what is today, then what is going to happen today can create tomorrow. So you lose the shackles, you lose the whole victim mentality, you lose like, oh, woe is me, or I was born the wrong color, or all these stupid things that people like try to feed you to make you a victim, because if they can make you a fearful victim, then they can control you. And when they can control you, they're never going to want to lose that control over you. So they're going to keep laying on the victim stuff and trying to feed you more things to make you feel like it's not your fault. When you start to take back that power and realize, like, hey, I'm overweight because I'm not eating properly and I'm not exercising, or I don't have any good relationships because I have high standards and I'm just intolerant and I'm not really a likable person, right? You start to understand these things. You're not getting promoted because you're not investing in those skills and that knowledge that are required to get to the next level. And
Hmm.
it's always the decisions you're making or the actions you're not taking. So knowing that, it's like, hey, I can't wait to make some changes to be a better version of myself and go find these things. And then I get to control where my destiny goes. And if I'm in a crappy relationship, like, I don't have to be here. There's these things called divorces or breakups later. Yeah, it's a financial burden perhaps. But you know what? That shit gets over in a few months and you're like, cool, like I feel free again.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
change your life, people. You're gonna die. We're all gonna die. Why would you wait around and like suffer unnecessarily for extra amount of years when it's all
Yeah.
your choice?
Yeah. Well, and I think, it's a great place to wrap up because I feel like we're starting to come out of this, for those listening later, we're in the what are we 18 months into this crazy COVID crisis, and we're finally getting alive again in our world. And I just think there's so much out there for us all to take part of, and take part in a bigger way in our lives, and building of other people. Tony, I just love your mission so much, and I'm so very, very grateful to get some time with you today. And I'm excited to see what I feel like God plants a lot of seeds in our lives. And I feel like this conversation is a great seed. Who knows what he's going to help us create together. So I'm excited.
Hey, Lisa, I really appreciate the opportunity. And it's been a really cool conversation because, one, we got into the parenting side of things, which is not a really common conversation I get into. And I really enjoy those kind of things because there's a lot of perspectives that parents know better, but they don't say. I'm
Yeah.
not afraid to say what's on my mind, obviously, but a lot of people have these kind of thoughts, but they're not willing to vocalize it. So, you and I are doing that in this episode.
I want to share with our audience, what are you excited about right now? You have another event coming up for 365 Driven. So tell us about that.
Yeah, absolutely. 365 Driven is an entrepreneurship community. We didn't get it going in the backstory, but I built some online automotive communities to 500,000 combined members. And I said, my other passion is business. Let me start a large entrepreneurship support, mentorship, coaching, accountability type community. And so we create these destination type vacations because we realize a lot of business owners don't take vacations. And we want to have them in destination locations and have some takeaways. And we do some exploration. We have some action, some things that are going on. Like, for example, we did in Utah. We hiked in Zion National Park, went down the Narrows Trail, and we had these different things to go on. And we did another event in Montana and Whitefish, and we hiked that, and we did some whitewater rafting. And the next event's going to be in Tucson, Arizona, where we rented out a historic dude ranch. So there's the whole like
Oh,
Western
how
vibe and
fun.
horses. And then one day is actually going to be the high horsepower. You go from one horse to 717 horses.
Oh my
And we
goodness.
rented out a racetrack, and we're going to go get a full day of high performance driving on a road course and a Dodge Hellcats, the SRT Hellcats. And so that's the kind of adrenaline type stuff. We like to build the memories, the activities, the camaraderie, and I keep the events small. We try to keep them under 50 people because me being a speaker at several events, thousands of people, and doing these things, they're okay, but you don't build the connections like you do at a small event. The event, everybody leaves as a friend, and you got a whole new, uh, really an army of supporters 40, 50 people when you leave, like everybody's like new friends. And it's amazing what we get to see the conversations that happens. I'm a community builder, and it's
Yeah.
my job to create the lines of communication and the bonds between each and every member of my community. That's my role.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I am just so, so blessed to meet you and get to spend some time with you. And let's make sure we do this again sometime soon, shall we?
Awesome. Yeah, great time.
Absolutely.
Great time.
Okay. Well, friends, as always, I am so very blessed to be part of your day. I hope this conversations brought some awakenings for you, helped you step into your greatness and discover some of maybe your God gifted roles that you have been hiding from, perhaps that you're meant to pursue. So, blessings to you in this amazing life journey, my friends, and we'll see you soon. Bye, Tony.